Have I seen the money cycling in the AI bubble? They're like 500 to 700 billion dollars doing cycles in 7 to 8 companies, and all of them reports it as revenue. Truly insane. Yeah, was talking about that before. It's just money changing hands. It doesn't mean like anything of value was like actually created. These companies just handing each other money is like making their balance sheets like look better. Let me see if I can get the graphic because there was a Bloomberg article. All right, there it is. There's the Bloomberg graphic. Um, OpenAI. So Nvidia is at the center of this. OpenAI recipient of 500 billion, and they got it broken down. This is from Bloomberg: hardware or software, investment, services, venture capital, and the circles are sized by market value. So the bigger the circle, bigger the market value. You can see this is all around Nvidia's chips. $4.5 trillion selling these chips to companies that are not figuring out ways to make money off of it. They're figuring out ways to raise money off of it, but not actually become profitable and make money on a sustained basis and actually return profit to the investors who have been absolutely throwing money down a hole with these companies. But there you go. It's like, see, so you see the arrows pointing to each other. The different colored arrows represent what the money is for. You can see Microsoft, huge, almost 4 trillion. Oracle, Intel, AMD, and yeah, that's the AI bubble in a nutshell right there. Is all these companies just giving each other money to try to keep everything afloat. But like the end of the day, eventually they're going to turn to the investors and be like, we need another $100 billion. And they're just going to say, no, I just gave you like $500 billion and you gave me back like nothing, you know? When this goes, I mean, the crash of 29 that kicked off the Great Depression was largely focused around massive stock overvaluation. You know, I'm not saying it's exactly like 1929, but I'm not going to say there's no similarities. 3 years ago, you know, the announcements were made that this was going to like revolutionize everything, you know, and put everybody out of work and this and that. Like none of that has happened. None of that has happened so far. And like I said, they're laying people off now, but that's probably just because of the recession. They're saying, oh, it's AI. No, they're hoping AI can like clean up the mess, but they just have to lay people off because liquidity's drying up. You can see that. Look at the repo market charts. The liquidity is gone, so things are a lot tighter. They're laying people off, and they're just crossing their fingers that AI can, you know, keep their company together with a skeleton crew. Like I said, I think this is a game changer. So my fundamental position right now is I want to see how this plays. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I want to see how this plays out because I have a feeling that what we're talking about today, kind of like how in 2007 it was like unthinkable we weren't going to be talking about terrorism as like in the first 3 items of business on every newscast, like till the end of time. And then Lehman Brothers happened. No one mentioned terrorism again for like several years. And I have a feeling, you know, a lot of the stuff that's being talked about now, like we were just talking about the ICE raids. You think people are still going to give a shit about, you know, the quote unquote immigrant threat, which few people even care about on the level that the government's going after people on, or like just any of the other scapegoats that they've done, whether it's like criminal aliens or you know, LGBTQ plus people. There have been various scapegoats, and it's like when their system is collapsing because of like banks and AI, it's super hard to blame that on you know, terrorism or whatever the concocted scapegoat is. And I just can't, it can't come fast enough for me. I think that that will be a game changer in my view. Yeah, the yield inversion only occurred in September 2024. Well, the re that they that the inversion was over at that point. It was inverted for like 2 years, which is a record. And duration of inversion tends to correspond to intensity of downturn. So, I mean, it by that metric, it should be, or by that indicator, it suggests it may be bigger than 2008, which was big. I mean, that was big news that fundamentally changed a lot of people's politics and outlook on capitalism. I understand people's frustration today with the inertia going on right now in politics. You might be ready for a lot of change, and a lot of people are still being really sluggish about that. Understand, though, 2008 was a big catalyzing moment, and we're in a different place now because of that. We wouldn't be having this conversation here without that, really. You wouldn't be listening to like a communist channel if not for that. And all the more so after the next crack up. Like I said, we've been in like Never Never Land since 2008 as far as the tricks they've been pulling and the kind of, juggling act they've been doing to try to keep the economy afloat since 2008. In my opinion, they're basically out of tricks. They're going to have nothing left but a sovereign debt crisis. I mean, it could really severely, fundamentally impact the U.S. government in a way that would have been unthinkable in like, definitely 20 or 30 years ago. Nvidia investing in OpenAI buying Nvidia GPUs, Oracle giving OpenAI money, and OpenAI hosting their cloud infra on Oracle. You're getting the picture. We are still stuck in the '08 crisis. Yeah, it never really ended. All they did was they did quantitative easing to get the system moving again. The same basic problems are there. Because what happened there was all the, so the subprime mortgage crisis, they were giving mortgages to people that absolutely could not pay them, and they knew that. They were bundling these mortgages into derivatives and like selling those. And, investors would buy them and say, what's this backed by? It's backed by mortgages. Well, normally you'd go, well, okay, well, that's somebody's house. They're going to make that payment. So it's a fairly reliable investment. The problem is these were the shittiest mortgages ever. There were mortgages written that the people couldn't pay. And although it was their house, they were going to lose their house because they just could not keep up the payments. And so there was, that was a lot of it was the subprime mortgage crisis. But why did they make those loans? Why did they not just stick to people who could pay their mortgages? Well, the more desperate they get for profit, the more they have to go out on those limbs, and those limbs do snap. And we're back there. So the difference between now and '08 is shadow banking. Some of this did get regulated out. However, the market still had a need for that liquidity. They had a need for the capital. They had a need for the lending. And if you couldn't get it through official channels, and the Fed did open up its window and there were new ways to get cash because they were desperately trying to inject liquidity in to prevent a credit crunch, which was pretty much 2008 was like, nobody is creditworthy. We're not lending any money, which would have meant economic paralysis, a credit crunch, because everything is dependent on, a bank lending you money. That's how money enters the economy. That got transferred into the shadow banking, less regulated, again, non-depository financial institutions, the shadow banks. So now the question is like, how much exposure do the mainstream banks, the too big to fails, how much exposure do they have to the shenanigans going on in the shadow banks? Which, again, there was a need for this money to keep capitalism going. And it got moved into this unregulated, shadowy system. And, eventually they take risks that are too big because they have to keep chasing profits and chasing yield. Something blows up eventually. And I don't know how they're going to get out of it because quantitative easing was the main thing. And they've already done a lot of quantitative easing. If they do a lot more, we're looking at inflation like really dangerous. I mean, even as is right now, the target is 2% inflation. We're at 3% inflation in the U.S. So Jerome Powell actually just said, the Fed chair, that a December rate cut is not a done deal. So everybody was thinking that the Fed was going to cut interest rates and make money easier to get, cheaper to get in December. And he's like, well, we got 3% inflation. Do not consider that a done deal. So they're not out of the woods by a long shot. And you see these subprime lender things. And we're just talking about also the buy now, pay later stuff like Klarna. And there's a couple other companies that are literally doing people just buying groceries and shoes and jackets on buy now, pay later stuff and defaulting on it. People are defaulting on their fucking grocery payment. What does that say about where we're at? It's done. This cycle is wrapping up, and I don't know how they're going to get out of it, but there's going to be a lot I'm trying to, my main focus right now is trying to digest as much as possible about that. Because when 2008 hit, I wasn't following finance at all. So I had no idea what Lehman Brothers even like was. This time I'm trying to get ahead of it so that when that happens, I can be ready with messaging about why it happened and why capitalism is just fucking cooked. And if you're thinking that capitalism is cooked, you're right. You need to start learning socialism now. And yeah, a lot of people will lose their jobs. It's going to be really bad. This is the price of letting capitalism run this long, you know? I mean, yeah, people were lied to. They were lied to and they were told, no, capitalism's good. You should support it. Has plenty of gas left in the tank. Everything's good. I mean, they just told you that because they had an interest in running this thing up to the last possible second, you know? So people were lied to. And yeah, maybe people were greedy too. They're like, I can have this life and we don't need socialism and whatever. Capitalism is just not going to last forever. It's just not going to last, you know? That rate of profit falls. The system isn't stable. And the movement for socialism will get louder. The less people believe that there's a future for capitalism. And, you know, when you go through major once-in-a-lifetime economic crises multiple times in your life, you start going, hey, I think this is bullshit. And sadly, Occupy in the U.S., as opposed to how those methods were utilized during the so-called Arab Spring, showed that the powers that be will either wait you out or kick you out. Yeah, Occupy was just starting to, like, formulate demands, but it didn't really get that organized. And then I would see Bernie Sanders as taking a lot of the discussion that happened during Occupy and taking that to like a next level. But then he fed it into the Democratic Party. And that was my whole playlist. People listening to this aren't, you know, started listening recently. We have a playlist on the channel titled Socialists Against Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Party. It's like 7 or 8 videos we did back in the spring on these topics and how Bernie Sanders really led people into a dead end. And how we're never going to get an end to capitalism that way. You're just going to get more bullshit. Basically, you're going to get more people telling you they can reform capitalism. It's really run by people who have a vested interest in seeing the system continue. And that's everything. The inequality, the poverty, the war, all the unnecessary suffering that capitalism causes at home and abroad. They are trying to perpetuate that. And Bernie Sanders, unfortunately, is part of that. One of the main sources on this is a Counterpunch article from 2015, which talks about Bernie's secret deal with the Vermont Democratic Party. That's why he never started a party. They would let him run as an independent as long as he never started a party. They wouldn't run a serious challenger against him. And so we go into that. It's been all a scam. He's nominally independent, but he's really been working as a Democrat this whole time. And we'll show you that in that whole playlist. So, but yeah, we have to get independent of all that. Whether it's Graham Plattner, whether it's AOC. I mean, have we forgotten the lessons of fucking AOC already? Really? Because we went through all this already. You know, and people are just still biting that hook. You got to move on. But how will we win elections? It's not about winning the goddamn elections. It's about getting organized and building a parallel system, because this whole system is not savable indefinitely. It will end. This system will lose the confidence of the people in this country, and we will need a new system. We need to start building that parallel system today, if for no other reason in the short term, to take care of each other. And then as the existing system dies, it can actually take over and become the new system. And of course, there'll be a struggle between the two systems, absolutely, because you know they'll be in denial of no, we can save it. We've got to crush this thread. It's all their fault. You know, obviously, there's going to be a struggle. This is the class war. But the point is not to like take over their system. That's the mistake the reformists make. Their system is going down. You're going to go down with that ship. It's futile. Let it go down. Build the thing that's going to take its place and that will protect us in a way that even the best meaning individuals who make the most promises in the existing system, they can't really protect you. They can't protect you. And I think people are seeing that. The Democrats aren't protecting anybody, really. People feel terrified. They feel abandoned. And yeah, I mean, rightfully so. We need another system that can take care of us both in the short term and become the new system. That's what this is about. It's not about winning elections. The elections are a whole separate, like, tactical question. And we've done videos on that. But that's not the overarching thing here at all. Nvidia stock value is the whole S&P 500, which is like the top 500 companies, market value from 1995. No problem there, I'm sure. AI companies will never be able to produce the amount of power to do what they're promising. I hear they're already using the same amount of power for their data centers as New York City. The scary part is that won't stop them from trying and ruining the environment in the process. Yeah, there's a video from More Perfect Union, which has problems, is not a communist channel, but they did some investigative reporting on the Bitcoin. I think it's a Bitcoin mining thing, and the deafening noise that it's making in the place where they set it up. It's like as big as a football stadium. And it's just fucking mining Bitcoin. It's like they found a way to be like, how can we waste as much fossil fuel as humanly possible? It's like just taking resources and throwing them down a hole to make what? AI slop? You're going to waste drinkable water and all this fossil fuel to just make fucking AI slop? But that's what they're doing. Because why? The people at these companies are making so much money in the short term bilking investors. It's all going to dry up eventually, but they don't. What does that matter? If you make $10 billion now, it doesn't matter if your company doesn't exist 2 years from now. You have $10 billion. You're completely set. And what's the cost? Well, that's the environmental cost and, of the power generation and the water use. They use water to cool the computing systems because it's, just like a fan in a computer, it creates heat.